What do you suppose, folks, was running through Moses' mind as he sat there and stared at that scene? A scene of beauty, a scene of, look at the picture, green. They'd been in the desert. They had not had water. He sees green. And if Moses is like so many who arrive in their last days, he looked back on his life. Do you remember the movie, Barbra Streisand, the song, The Way We Were? Y'all remember that? Memories, like the corners of my mind, misty watercolor memories of the way we were. Moses had to go back, just like we go back, remembering things and how it was. And it goes on to say, if we had the chance to do it all again, who knows what the next words are?
Would we?
Would we?
Could we?
Could we? Thank you, Deborah. I'm so proud y'all are musicians. It makes my function so much easier. You know, think about where you are in life and everything that you've been through. And you could go back through it again and have a do-over. Would we? Could we? You know, I think Moses' place right at this point is very, very normal. And he looked back at his life and he saw just a very unlikely adventure. And although he was much too young to realize it when it was happening, the fact that he survived his own infancy was a miracle. He had come into this world at a time of trial for his people. They were a nation of slaves in Egypt. And they had been that way, and they had lived there for some 400 years. But now, the Hebrew birth rate had gone crazy. And they were having babies every time anybody turned around, and the Hebrew birth rate intimidated their masters. And the Pharaoh announced a terribly harsh population control policy. Newborn girls would be allowed to live. Newborn boys would be killed. And who was responsible for killing those boys? The midwives. And what were the midwives? Son of a gun, they were the Hebrew women. And they just weren't real keen on the idea of doing in the children of their own people. So they concocted a story, and I love the story, that they could not comply with the order because the Hebrew women were such efficient baby factories that they delivered the babies before the midwife could even arrive. So the Pharaoh had to revise his order. He let the girls live, but the boys, the order said, take them out and do what with them? Anybody remember? Drown them. Okay. Well, in the midst of all this, baby Moses arrives, and his parents were very unanxious to comply with the Pharaoh's directives. So they hid Moses for 3 months. Well, after 3 months, that became a little bit difficult and it was impractical. So Moses' mother, Jochebed, came up with this very unlikely scheme. She made a makeshift boat out of reeds and out of tar. And she placed baby Moses in it, and we all know the story. We learned it when we were this big about Moses and the bulrushes. And she put that makeshift boat with Moses in it, in the reeds, in the river, and we know what happened. We know what happened exactly. The daughter of Pharaoh and her entire entourage came to the water, to the river for their bath. And they heard a baby crying in the basket, and they found that baby, and they took pity on him and decided to adopt him. Well, Moses' big sister, Miriam, was playing in this role too, and the princess arranged for Jochebed to be the wet nurse. How unlikely is that Moses' mother, Jochebed, would be the wet nurse for Moses? Pretty unlikely. Something's going on here. Do you think it's providence, or is it coincidence? And not only did Jochebed become Moses' wet nurse, she got paid for it. Now, that's pretty cool that a mama gets paid to nurse her own baby. God's at work, folks. It's an unlikely story, but He is at work. And we have to remember, no matter how unlikely the story is sometimes, God can do it. Scripture doesn't tell us how long Moses remained with his natural parents before he had to move to the palace. But we can figure out that he lived long enough with them to learn about his true heritage as a Hebrew child and to be shaped by that heritage and to be formed by heritage. Jewish legend has it that he grew to be so handsome and so attractive that when he would walk down the street, people would stop what they were doing and heads would turn to look at him, to admire him. And not only was he handsome, he was very smart. The amount of knowledge he gained in childhood was far, far superior to other children that he was with. And one day, the princess took Moses to her father. And she was so enraptured with him and how handsome he was that she put him in the Pharaoh's arms, and Pharaoh became entranced with this child. And because of the princess's urging, and at her urging, Pharaoh promised to make Moses an heir. That's a pretty unlikely story, isn't it? Here's this little Hebrew kid who should be dead in the arms of Pharaoh, and unknown to the Pharaoh, he was a Hebrew child, but he promised to make him an heir. Well, almost 40 years go by, and Moses is out in the desert. I'm sorry, I jumped and I shouldn't have. Moses' next adventure, though, comes as he is part of the court in Egypt. And his next adventure comes when he defends a fellow countryman who was being beaten by an Egyptian taskmaster. Defend is too mild, probably a word. To get cut to the chase, Moses killed the fellow. And then he buried him in the sand, and Moses thought that would be the end of the matter. However, people saw it happen, and word got around, and soon Moses was hightailing it out of Egypt so that he could avoid persecution for murder. And he ended up in the land of Midian, an unlikely place. And at age 40, his career as a prince and his career as heir to the throne was over. So at age 40, he starts a new career. He becomes a shepherd in that desert region. And in the process of learning the terrain of that country, as events would come to show, he learned something that way down the road he would desperately need to know. So 40 more years go by, and Moses is out in the desert tending the family flocks, and over there by Marcus, he sees this bush that's burning, but it's not being consumed. It just keeps burning, and it keeps burning, and it keeps burning. And he goes over to that bush, and he wants to look at it. And he's just like you and I were. He was curious, and out of the bush comes the word, Moses. Moses. It's God's call to another career change for good old Moses. God says, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come to deliver them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Whoa! Whoa, says Moses. He didn't want any part of this. He tried to beg off. And he says to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? I am nothing but a shepherd. I'm nobody. God answers, doesn't matter. I'm going to be with you. And Moses responds, well, I don't know what to say or to tell him who has sent me. And God takes care of that. He says, I am. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has sent you. They won't believe me, Moses answered. If they don't believe you, God says, I will give you miraculous signs to perform. Check this out. Drop your staff on the ground. So Moses has his staff there, like all good shepherds, and he dropped the staff right on the ground. And what happened to the staff? Somebody tell me, what did it turn into? A snake. Good. And, God says, now, pick it up again. Well, Moses wasn't real fond of the snake down there, but he reluctantly replies, and he bends over, and he picks up the snake, but when he gets it up, son of a gun, it's become a staff again. Then God says, put your hand inside your coat. Now, pull it out. And Moses pulled it out, and that hand was eaten up with leprosy. And Moses recoils in horror, and he looks at it, and God says, put it in again. And Moses does. And then he said, pull it out again. And all is well. Something's going on here. Is it providence? Is it coincidence? Pretty darned unlikely, no matter what it is. But Moses still is not convinced, and he's not ready. And he says, I am not eloquent. Public speaking isn't my thing. And God answers. And I love God's answer here. God says, I made your mouth. Don't worry about it. Don't whine about it. Don't give a thought to being a poor speaker. One last try. Moses said, oh my Lord, please, please send somebody else. And God responds, I will send your brother Aaron to help you. He can be your mouthpiece. But Moses, old buddy, you are going to go. So Moses embarks on career number 3. At the vigorous young age of 80 years old, he makes his way back to Egypt, to the nation of his birth, the nation from where he had fled for his life a generation before. Unlikely as all get out in a life that has been full of unlikely events. Moses makes his way back to the palace. He confronts Pharaoh and he says, let my people go. Well, as you would expect and as you know from knowing the story, his demand was met with less than enthusiasm. And it took a number of plagues to convince the Pharaoh that he needed to comply with Moses' request. And then there was the mass exodus, the hot pursuit of Pharaoh's military right on their tails, climaxed by the miraculous deliverance of the people at the parting of the waters of the Red Sea. Memories, like the corners of my mind. Moses is sitting here, looking out across the Promised Land, looking over Jordan at the new homeland of his people. And his mind must have just been spinning back over those 40 years, and what an experience. How many insurrections had he faced, even from his own family? How many complaints about running out of food? How many complaints about running out of water? These people, these crazy Hebrew people, he thought, never knew when they were well off. They even went so far, he remembered, to ask for their own slave life again. Sadly, what should have been his finest hour with Yahweh on Sinai and the gift of the law, that too was ruined by what he found when he came back down the mountain. There was his dear brother, Aaron, leading all of the people of Israel in worship around a golden calf, the idol that Aaron had made from the bracelets, the rings, the earrings of the people. And Moses' first reaction when he saw what was going on there was to take those tablets in a fit of rage and smash them on the ground and leave them there. But not only did he want to smash the tablets, you remember from last week, he wanted to take those people and smashed them too. But finally, when his anger and his frustration began to wane, underneath was a love for those